So I made a list. It was basically an Instagram post at the beginning of this year, or I think it was on New Year's Eve last year, on my goals for this year. And those goals, I was to finish reading the series of books that I had started reading, and I was to finish the next series of books that I had also planned. And it was to watch the remaining 3 or 4 seasons of Pokemon that I hadn't yet watched as well by the end of the year, and it was to finish 2 games that I had started, just barely started on one of them. The first game was Undertale, which is a great game. It's sort of a retro style game. And the second one was Ruined King. I started that when I went to visit my family for New Year's. So I had the goal of completing those 2. I have basically not done any of those goals. So I watched probably about 100 episodes of Pokemon this year. I'm still missing a lot. And I finished reading one of the book series that I had started on, but I'm about 2/3 done with the second one. I haven't touched any of those 2 games in the last probably 4 months. So at least for Undertale, I probably won't finish that one because I won't have the chance over Christmas. But that brings me nicely into my next point, and that is whether or not I will actually complete them. Yes, there are still like 2 weeks left of the year, a little bit more than that, 2.5 weeks left of the year. And so it gives me a fair bit of time to actually work on my goals. So I will probably finish the first game that I meant, or Ruined King, which is one of the games that I mentioned. I'm like 50% done with it, and it is a great game for the story, and that helps me a lot when it comes to learning language. And I will probably finish the book that I'm reading at the moment, but I will probably not finish the next book, which is the 4th and last book of the series Inheritance, which is the series about Aragon. I don't know if you've seen those massive books with giant dragons on them. I definitely shown them in a different video. I should probably talk about how that makes me feel, and maybe a little bit about why I ended up failing on those goals. I actually don't feel too bad about this. As I'll mention later on, I did end up studying quite a bit. I did end up learning a lot, but just a lot of things happened, and I had to change up the way that I was working with the university as well. And I had a few weeks where I bit off a bit more than I could chew. Basically, I said yes to many things at work, and so that ended up costing me a bit of energy, and thus I couldn't study as much, or I didn't feel like studying as much. But another thing is that I was lacking in at times, but I definitely had enough time. Probably the main thing is I was lacking in discipline, because a lot of those things, they were becoming a bit of a chore, which is something that I try to steer clear of, but I figured I've made them into my goals, so I should probably try to force myself to do it. That's always been my main thing about when you're learning a language on your own. You should never make things into a chore, because that will lead to you not wanting to do it. And that was essentially what I was doing. Sitting down to play a video game on a schedule. I know that sounds like a dream, like being a streamer and such, and getting paid to do it. I'm not getting paid to study, but getting paid to do it, like doing it on a schedule and having that actually be your job, that sounds like a dream. I mean, I wasn't being paid to do it, but I could certainly see why, even if you're being paid to do it, it really isn't that fun in the long run. And so I couldn't continue doing that. I didn't manage that. And so I had a lot of things that ended up changing my plans as well, because I ended up with new goals. There are a lot of things that ended up changing my plans for the year. Probably the biggest one was I got to know my girlfriend online, and so we spent a lot of time talking. And while that is great, and I definitely wouldn't trade that experience for anything else in the world, it's been amazing. It completely fries my brain at times, and thus I will just want to relax and not go back to studying after I've been talking to her. Sometimes I can manage that, but a lot of the time I end up not having the energy to do any sort of studying at all. So I just ended up doing different things. I still studied. For instance, I ended up watching different series. I ended up watching a bit of Scrubs. Almost finished the 2nd season on that. I ended up watching a fair bit of The Flash, that very recently. And I just really enjoyed watching those 2 series. And so it felt sort of boring going back to watching Pokemon. If I'm enjoying these other series and I know that I'm getting the benefit from those. I also ended up watching a fair bit of movies. That always ends up teaching me a fair bit. And then I ended up also listening to audiobooks. I finished the entire audiobook of The Hobbit, and I'm about 1/3 done with the first book of The Lord of the Rings as well. And that is a fair bit of like input, and you end up learning a lot from that. And I've just been experimenting with other things such as that for a lot of the year. I even looked into the opportunity of starting to read more manga and such, but I really still want to finish reading the Inheritance series before I do that. So I will probably sit down and do my best to finish that. But I will definitely have a lot of time when I'm visiting my parents, so at least the first book should be fairly easy to finish. And then I'll probably make a decent dent into the fourth book, like get quite far, but I do have about 1,200 pages left. So that is an average of 80 pages left per day. And I probably won't do that. I don't know, but I'm just saying that I probably won't do that. So I'm just making this just because at this point it's kind of seems like it's meaningless to make your list of goals. But I would actually argue that it is definitely not. So for me, making a list of goals is very useful because that means that, okay, I know that these are my priorities. These are things that I have at least thought that, okay, I'm going to be learning a lot from doing these things. I just trust the process. The way that I set my goals is that I always set goals like reading something, watching a series, and speaking to people and doing stuff like that. Things that aren't linked to me directly learning. I could say, okay, I want to learn the past tense, or I want to get better at the past tense. But I'm just trusting that me reading books will lead to me getting better at using the past tense in Portuguese, and that is also sort of related to what I'm writing my master's thesis on, which is something that I'm very interested in, using reading and then learning based on that. So that is how I'm making my goals. I'm setting a task that I need to do, and then I'm just expecting learning to be a byproduct of that. And I'm just hoping that I'm setting tasks that are fun enough for me to actually manage to do them. But one thing that I would do is, because I used to split these into smaller goals, like monthly goals, and I would also go through at the end of the month what I had actually done that month. And so I think I am probably going to go back and do that. I'm probably going to, whether or not that gets turned into a video or not, I will probably do that and try to see these were my goals for the month. But what I ended up doing was these other things. Does that mean that I have to adjust my goals, or does that mean that I just have to focus more? Are my goals still feasible? Can I still have the same goals, or should I change up my goals for the next month, and so on? And will that lead to me actually managing to complete my goals for the year? Because I will be making a list of goals for the year, but I will have to go through that list several times, going through and making it into monthly goals, and actually adjusting these monthly goals based on what I'm doing. That will be the way that I'm doing it. And I think that will actually be successful. But like I said, I still ended up studying a lot. I just did different things than what I was initially planning on. Now, one last thing. I assume you've noticed by now that this video is in English. I know, big surprise. You've been listening to this in English for probably about 10 minutes without realizing that it's actually English and not Portuguese. That really happened. Another thing is I'm probably going to be doing this a lot in the future as well. So I'm actually really liking doing the vlogs, forcing myself to speak and talk about my plans for the day and such. And it seems like I'm already getting comments on how my Portuguese is improving, which is amazing. But I will probably be making these other videos weekly as well, and they will be, for the most part, in English. Because that way I can actually talk about subjects and go more into depth on those subjects. And I will be looking into ways of adding subtitles for that. That is coming at some point. But that is probably the way that the channel is going to be built at the moment. So one weekly vlog in Portuguese, and then one more well planned out video in English. So those are my current plans. Leave me a comment on what you think about these plans, if you make it this far. And also, whatever you might want to see. You can leave that as a comment, or you can send me a DM on Instagram, which is going to be linked in the description of this video. And yeah, as always, best of luck with your studies. Nick out.